Hi, my name's Phil and I'm bringing this old canoe stern motorboat back to life. She's 32 foot long and for the last year I've been saying she's 87 years old. Since she's now been here a year, I'm going to start saying she's 88 years old and her name is Jabiru. So while the riveting and punching of the hull goes on, I've decided to embark on a mission to draw the boat and come up with a lines plan, and I'll tell you why. Normally with a boat like this, the engine would be in the place that it was when it was built, and the water tanks and the fuel tank would be in the places where they should be, so there wouldn't be an issue of trim or doubt about what the trim would be. In this case, in this boat, Jabiru, it had an engine that was 900 millimeters aft of the existing engine beds, which would have held the original engine. And also I've got no idea what sort of engine that original engine was and how big it was. So the trim of the boat is in question. So I'd like to put the engine in a place that suits me, and I'll also be able to adjust the trim using the weight of the fuel and water tanks. Another issue I should talk about is the waterline. When I decided to draw it, I drew stations on the boat all the way down the length of the hull, and to use a datum point I decided to use the waterline. So I started transferring the waterline from the aft end and the forward end onto each station. When I did that and got to about the midship section, the waterline that had been drawn on the boat was 105 millimeters lower than the waterline that I was marking, which was on a level boat. And I was confident that my boat was level, so there was something drastically wrong. Anyway, that'll just have to be one of the mysteries of life. I had a serious look at the waterline, and what I found was that when I levelled the boat so that the marks at each end of the boat were dead level, I did that with the water level. When I started transferring that water level around to the middle of the boat, I ended up with a bit less than, and I guess you can see that there, a bit less than 400, about 380 millimeters of freeboard, which seems a little low. So what I've decided to do is I've dropped the waterline 50 millimeters. So you can see that's now the new level of the waterline, 50 millimeters below where it was. Now, looking at photos of boats similar to this, the waterline is down here somewhere normally, quite a lot lower than even that one is. So I thought, as a starting point, I'll make that my waterline and then work out the underwater volume, and I'll get an estimate of the weight of the boat and see where it should go. That'll bring our freeboard to about 435 millimeters below the top of the deck. I've done the same thing around the front of the boat here. I've dropped it 50 millimeters, so that's our new waterline down there. Well, I'm back again, and I'm talking about the where to put the engine. So I've decided to draw the boat. I've changed the waterline, as you've seen previously in the video, 2 inches lower than it had been. It still looks pretty high, doesn't it? When you look at those nails there, that's the height of the waterline. So that's a temporary one. After I've drawn it and worked out underwater volume versus weight, we'll probably adjust that waterline. Hopefully not in a fore and aft direction, but just maybe up and down, I hope. I'm sort of hoping we can keep the trim of the boat as it looks now. It's a little laser level. I've got a square off the keel, and I line up my laser line on that square. And then it gives me a line up the hull all the way to the shear line. And what I'm doing is, here's a line that I've marked previously. A pencil line goes all the way down to the keel. What I've done, and I've shown you before, is I've put lines down on 11 stations. So I've got 12 spaces from stem to stern. And I've got this device here, which is marked at the waterline level, and then it goes down every 125 millimeters. And then I've got this, which will go on and sit there. It has to actually be clamped. So I'll set that on the waterline length, waterline height, I should say. There we go. Now the object, I'm using one laser level, which is that one, to set this up so that that's perfectly vertical. And then I have a square which sits against the keel. I can't put it on now because I've put this thing, this truss back on, and I've already drawn this one, so I don't need to move that, post again. But this sets the distance that is out from the keel. And then I clamp that in place so it's perfectly vertical. And then I've got a horizontal section there, which I can then just bring in against the side of the boat at whatever height I need. And then I can take a measurement. This mark here is the same as that edge there, which is perfectly balanced against that. I can then measure from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, be 500, about 520 or so from the boat there. So then I can take a series of points and work out a lines plan. Once I've got the lines plan, I can then surface it, find out the volume, and we'll be right. So I'm going to do this on a time-lapse video now and do all the measuring. So I've done this station here. I've got to do the rest of them. So I'm going to start at this end and work forward. So something I forgot to mention, I tried to do this with a free sample off the net of a 3D scanning program, which you can use an SLR camera for. And I think you can take something like 200 photos. So I took it, and the result was pretty wobbly to the point where I thought I'll just go back to the old school way and draw it up properly. So and then I can draw it up, fair it up, and then I've got a good model of the boat, which I haven't had before because I never found out who made it. So so we'll go from there. These are images from the 3D scanning program. My son Sean suggested that we do this, and he took the photos and played with the program to produce these images. He didn't have time to learn how to use this program properly. He's very busy at work, and there ended up being fairly big issues of difficulty with exporting a DXF file so that I could do something with it in AutoCAD, which had been my first choice. In the end, to be honest, it looked so far out of the range of my experience with computer drawing programs that I threw my hands up in despair and went back to what I know.
Because I'm familiar with AutoCAD, I was confidently able to confirm the measurements that I had taken were close to accurate. I was able to fare the shear line in side view and plan view, as well as the rabbet line and the curves around each station. For ease of calculations concerning centres of buoyancy and gravity, I decided to try a freeware boat design program. After reading up about what's available, I decided on FreeShip version 3.13 Plus from 2010. This allows for trouble-free access to all the figures that I need to use. I found it very easy to get my head around, even though it is a quite different approach to drawing to what I'm used to. But I would recommend it to anyone trying to do what I have done. I set the stations to exactly the same positions as in my AutoCAD drawing and replicated the waterline heights in both drawings. I was then able to transfer the accurate information from the AutoCAD drawing to FreeShip. Using both programs took up about 1/3 of the time it took to physically take measurements of the hull. My next task is to find the longitudinal centre of gravity of the hull as it now stands, and then make estimates of weight to be added back on board. You can see that I'm in a high state of tension with the boat wobbling about a single point of balance. This looks quite dangerous, but you've got to remember there's that big frame around the midships area that's holding it upright. The biggest danger in the whole process was that the keel might slip sideways once it got onto a wobbly pile of blocks. However, this didn't happen, so that was all okay. To begin with, I took a guess about where I thought the centre of gravity might be, and I made a set of blocks under the middle of the boat and put a 2-inch round bar as a pivot point to lay the boat on. I left the blocks, which are in the left-hand side of the picture here, in position in the aft end and put the jack forward, and then lifted it up, moved the roller fore or aft to try and find the point of balance. It worked pretty well. I put a piece of tape along the edge of the keel there so that I could put marks on it so I'd know where the roller had been put in the last attempt. You can see in previous shots that when I've lowered the boat onto the pivot point, it's been front heavy, so the rear end of the boat comes off the blocks on the left here. So then I have to jack it up, move the roller forward a little bit, the pivot point that is, a little forward a bit, and then try it again. So I had to do this 3 or 4 times before it came onto a point of balance. Moving that pivot point each time was only done by maybe 20 or 30 millimeters, and each time I did it, it was still front heavy, as you can see in that shot now. So what I'd use is a small crowbar and wedge it between the keel at the stem end and lift it up and down just to see how heavy on the front it was, and then I'd have to put it down again and move the roller. I'm still feeling that it's dangerous to be underneath this boat, because every time I put it down onto the point of balance, the boat would slew. So the aft end would go to the port side and the forward end would go to starboard. And I was concerned that it would actually fall off the blocks. Even though it's only moving a couple of centimetres each time, it's a little bit unnerving. And I think it might be because the boat's leaning towards the port side, so I'm thinking that I may have to jack it up and try and get the boat balanced level across the beam and see if that makes it easier to get everything right. The position and weight of each thing to be added from now on must be estimated and recorded relative to the initial centre of gravity. This will include major items such as decks, cabins, internal fit-out, engine, water tank, fuel tank, steering hardware, toilet, holding tank, batteries, bow thruster, anchor, weight of chain and anchor winch. All that will take a while to accurately assess, so in the meantime I'll work out a rule of thumb that usually works well and come up with an engine position. The other two heavy items, fuel and water, may be moved a little bit fore or aft as needed to complete the trim. You can see now that the boat's getting quite close to being balanced, so every time I put that little crowbar under and give it a wobble, it's bouncing up and down. Still a little bit front heavy, so I think I've got one more adjustment to make. Here's that piece of bar I've been using as a balance point, and at this point it's nearly balanced, so I've marked the centre of gravity as being there, and I'm jacking up the port side to try and get it away from the post a little bit so that the boat will move a little more freely. At the moment it's leaning over on this post. Well, finally the boat's in balance. You can see the way that's just moving up and down slowly. I don't think I could get it better than that. Well, it turns out that the centre of gravity, as I found it, was right here, level with Station 6. And the centre of buoyancy is just 70 millimetres forward of that point. So that's a great start. Now I'll decide where it's convenient to put the engine, and then I'll work out balancing out the boat by using the weight of the fuel and the water tanks, which will mostly be full, but then I've got cabin and all that stuff to go on, so we'll see. That's all there is for episode 6. So I hope you enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the process of measuring and drawing the boat and getting these answers that I needed. And I think the next episode, number 7, will probably feature these engine beds and what's going to happen to them. They'll either get repaired or moved, or most likely there's a bit of dry rot in this aft one, so it's going to have to be replaced anyway. So we'll see what the future holds.